we've been around for almost 12 years now and very much look at data around the thoughts, perceptions and behaviour of our attendees. As well as that, I'm also MD at ELX, which is the Event Leaders Exchange, which launched last week, and it's a community for senior corporate global heads of events. And I'm joined today by...
Hello, I'm Luke Bilton. So I've worked for the last 20 years or so in various media and events companies and sort of publishing, event director type roles. And now I work for Expo Platform. And so we're a technology company and we produce smart events, 365 communities and various different digital tools for some of the world's largest event organisers. So we work with conferences, big and small, including companies like Informa, RX, Clarion, Comexposium, and then the event agencies like the MCIs of the world as well. I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to have you both here, and I'm very much looking forward to your session on For Tech's Sake. Again, looking at things that we all as event planners are, whatever size of events, it's kind of like, how do you choose that tech partner and what should we be looking at for when we're doing that? So over to you guys.
Okay, so before we dive into the meaty content of the session, Luke, I did warn you, I like to start these interviews with a random fact about the person I'm interviewing. So for everyone in the audience today, one fact about Luke is that before he went into media, he wanted to be a music producer. So one project was some drum and bass music, which won a Diesel Award. And that meant that Luke was able to go to Milan to perform and appear on MTV. And Luke, here you are today with me at the EVENTIT Summer Web Series. So frankly, I think your career has certainly gone upwards.
What went wrong? I did think at one point that's what I wanted to do. It was definitely a lot of fun. But actually, what I would say is skills like audio production are actually really helpful when it comes to producing podcasts or videos or all of those kind of content related stuff. So I have used it in some way. But yeah, thank you for that, Chloe. Appreciate it.
Transferable skills, that's what we love. So
yeah.
Just a reminder to everyone in our audience, of course, you do have the chat function. Please do use it. I've got a list of questions I want to ask Luke myself, but anything that you throw in there, we'll try and pull it in if we possibly can. So we don't have much time. Let's dive right into the topic, event tech. I'm going to start with a bit of a stat because according to Bizzabo, 90% of event marketers believe that technology can have a major positive impact on the success of their events. And yet, it still seems as though so many organisers, whether exhibition or conferences or corporate organisers, are struggling to really define where tech can help them, to find the right tech to suit their needs, and then to even adopt technology, which a lot of people are sometimes doing just for the sake of it. So today we've got a bit of time to run over some tips of how to partner with the right tech to run your events programmes, but also we'll be looking at key things to consider and where we should all be looking at perhaps different industries for tech partnership inspiration. So, Luke, first question for you. We both work for event tech companies. So what we need to try and do over the next half an hour is be as objective and frank as possible. We've both come from platforms that have been around for quite a while. And over the last couple of years, our companies have been joined on the market by an absolute tsunami of tech businesses and products, probably that have been born from supporting the evolving needs of the events industry over the pandemic. I don't like to say the word, but it has been an unprecedented acceleration of digital transformation. So the first question, and a slightly controversial one for you, do you think if we hadn't had the turbulence of the pandemic, tech would be such a talking point as it is today? And so as a result, should we, as event tech pioneers, be grateful for that spotlight?
It's hard to say grateful, isn't it, in an industry which has been, decimated, had revenue drops by 90% in many companies over the pandemic. But on the flip side, there has been a huge acceleration in adoption by event organisers, by visitors, exhibitors, by the world at large of digital tools. It's kind of been like a caffeine injection to the heart of event technology, and it really has sped things up. And there's been a huge amount of investment put into the space. There's been a realization by event organisers about how at risk you are if you just have a single platform strategy and you don't think about how you use other channels to connect with each other. And I think it's probably been long overdue in many ways. And it's not just this pandemic, by the way. There's going to be, there are going to be other pandemics. There are going to be more issues with sustainability. It was the hottest day of the year by a long way in the UK this week. And the climate emergency is only going to get worse. So I think what it's done is made an awareness that you need to have as an event planner different tools in your box.
Put a pin in sustainability, because I think we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail later. So you mentioned that obviously the industry has been decimated. Headlines are really suggesting that event tech is crashing. We've seen over the last few weeks a wave of redundancies across the event tech sector. So what's your view on this? Do you think that we're kind of in a lull post-pandemic, or was this inevitable?
I think so. The longer term. So when I said the industry decimated, what I meant was actually like the host industry, like the events industry itself. Revenues from people running events. But over the pandemic, the technology companies generally did very, very well from it. But yeah, I think what we're seeing is the end of that virtual event bubble. But the underlying trends are extremely good. So even with the adoption of virtual technologies, there's still been a huge step change based on what it was previously. Not the height of the bubble, granted, but even so, it's become so much more widespread now. And virtual streaming technology is just a small part of event tech, and it's the entire event tech industry which has gone up. So taking a company like Expo Platform, for example, our focus is on in-person events. We can still do hybrid events, and we have the technology to do that. But our main focus is how do you add value to in-person events? And so for companies like ours, it's been incredibly energizing. There have been big losses. I mean, there's been I'm not going to name the names, but they're all, I'm sure everyone knows the headlines, but it's like 30% of some very, very large companies have dropped. Just in the last week, there's been widespread layoffs in some of the companies that were kind of like born during the pandemic. Went for loads of investment, overscaled. In some cases, I'd say probably made some slightly dodgy acquisitions that I didn't really understand from the outside. Some of those acquisitions, but it's. I think what we're seeing now is like a settling back to a much higher baseline than was there previously.
Of course, that makes sense. You mentioned there that event tech isn't just about virtual events, and I think that's a really key distinction to make, because often when we talk about event tech, people jump immediately to the metaverse and virtual events, but there's so much more that can be done with tech. And so on that note, I mentioned in the intro that organizations can find it really difficult to define where tech can actually support them and where it really fits in. So what do you think organizations should be doing to start with to really see where they might get support from technology? Sure.
So during the first wave of the pandemic, what everyone did was they picked up their physical event and they shifted it onto a virtual platform, and so they had everything that they were used to before. So exhibitors and sponsors connecting through different networking opportunities, content, but essentially it was the same bundle. They were picking up, lift and shift from physical into digital. What's happening now, certainly for the more savvy organisers, is that they've been trying to dig into where actually are the opportunities for us to add value here, because it isn't replicating exactly what the physical experience was virtually. So some examples of that, we did a survey, and we just published the results last week actually, about with the return to in-person event, what are those different types of technologies which add the most value? And interestingly, now lots of the respondents were from like larger scale trade shows. But the responses that came back to us were that the number one thing that technology can offer for that kind of sector is better ROI for exhibitors. So better lead retrieval, better quality, better volume of leads. That was the number one thing that came back. And then also, other things that ranked very highly were around on-demand streaming of content, so capturing the content and streaming it post-show, a seamless experience between event apps. For certain types of events, hosted buying has an almost magical effect on the NPS that an event can have. So when you look at like a typical event and then one which has hosted buying as a component, the satisfaction for visitors and exhibitors can be incredibly high. And then, for certain types of events where it's hard to get around, floor planning types of interactive maps and wayfinding, those types of solutions also come in quite handy. So, which is a long way to say, I think it's a case of trying to get under the skin of where can you add value to your customers, and being as focused on solving those real customer problems as you can.
Yeah, sounds good. So better ROI, NPS, customer satisfaction. Obviously something that we love at Exploria is customer satisfaction, so it totally resonates with me. On that note then, let's say somebody is at the top of an organisation that runs events and has decided, okay, we need to find some tech that supports us with this value piece. Mm-hmm. What are the 3 key things that you would recommend to such organisations in terms of thinking about what they really need to do before they start looking for a tech partner? So they've decided what needs support. What comes before actually reaching out?
The first bit is what's really important as part of the value proposition. So what are the important things that you want to improve? So as mentioned, that could be the problem we want to solve is how do we get more leads for our suppliers. Would obviously be the first one, being really clear about that, because that then automatically limits who it is that you're going to be looking at. So you're not looking at an event tech landscape of 200 plus companies. It enables you to sort of to drill in. So that would be the first one. Then I think one of the things I think is really important in this is trying to find someone that you can firstly, you've got to make sure, do due diligence to make sure that they do what you need them to do, or at least 95% of what you need them to do. So obviously got to do that. But then let's just assume you've got your list there of 10 companies or something that you want to work with. It's obviously worth making sure that they've got the credibility and the know-how in your particular space. So, I mean, case studies are incredibly useful. Do their customers look like me? But most of that can actually be done by desk research, going through people's websites, watching demos, reading testimonials, things like that. Where I think it gets really interesting is when you need to then sort of start to figure out, could this be a long-term partner for you? One of the biggest issues I think we have in the event space is that people think in show cycles, and so there's a real tendency to pick up a technology for an event, and then there's a mad scramble. If you're lucky, maybe there's a 12-week ramp up to the event. Everyone tries to figure out how to get the best use of this technology. The organizer tries to figure it out, often finding that there's gaps between how they've always done it and how this platform does it, and so trying to customize. There's a real issue actually in our industry with always trying to customize everything. Every event feels like it needs to have its own customization, when actually most events are fairly similar in terms of structure. So you figure that out, and then it's a question, I think, of do they actually really want to partner with me? Are we aligned for a longer term, so that we can get out of thinking in these short-term cycles? Because usually the first event probably isn't going to be the most amazing experience for everybody, because it isn't. It takes a while to get used to it. It takes a while to figure out how you communicate it to your visitors. It takes a while to figure out how you're going to get your exhibitors to adopt it. And the smartest companies that we work with, I think, or the ones which are approaching this right now, I think, in the best way, are thinking it in terms of a more sort of iterative approach, where you would take your first event and then you learn from that, you make changes, you roll it into your next event, and you roll it into your next event and to your next event. It's how you'd approach any other type of technology. You don't just implement Salesforce one day, let it run for 3 months, and then say, oh no, Salesforce didn't work, we're going to go to HubSpot, and then we go to Microsoft Dynamics. You just wouldn't do it. But in event technology, we often do that. So, and it's not the best way to get to get the most out of tech. So I'd look at it as that. Is this someone that I want to have a long-term partnership with? Is their roadmap aligned with what we want to do? Do they have the right principles in terms of the data which is captured? Does that belong to them? Does that belong to me? There's all sorts of things like that to think about. And the other thing I would say is also, I know there can be a tendency to be like us and them, and I've sort of worked on both sides of the fence. But like any partnership, it's like going into it and just trying to make it the best possible partnership, and realizing that there is a value to what you're getting. It isn't just a cost. So there's all sorts of ways underused that you can monetize these types of digital solutions. And too often it's thought about as a sunk cost, rather than an opportunity to transform the business model and to diversify the revenue. The amount that the event industry spends on event technology is still far too low.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
good stuff. Thank you so much. No, that was good. And some of the highlights I picked out from that bit there particularly is do your research, think long-term and big picture rather than just the short-term needs, and monetization, which is a really interesting point. I did want to quickly pull something on the data point, and this was in an earlier conversation as well on the series, all around data ownership and data standards. And I would encourage everybody who's watching today to have a look at VSEF, which is a event data standard across the board, because I think that could maybe help with some of those questions moving forward. It's not what we're here to talk about today, but it's something to really bear in mind. We've had a question on the chat that I think is probably worth pulling in, and it fits perfectly, I think, where we are in the question journey. Stuart Mitchell has said, there have been some great collaborations within the event sector, but I also see frustration about poor event tech integrations, resulting in a poor delegate experience. Have you seen good examples of joined up collaboration, and can you share any of those examples with us? And just before you answer that, Luke, I think it's interesting because we did talk about this when we had a quick chat before our session, that according to Forrester, 51% of event decision makers are satisfied with their events platform, but 94% have encountered issues with the platform setup. So probably really similar things there, talking to the same challenge. Collaboration, have you seen any good examples of that?
Yes, there are some good examples out there. There's also many bad examples. So I guess where I'd start is that integration can be one of the biggest headaches that the technology companies have, and particularly as everything is shifting so fast. Now we're shifting back into in-person events, and there's a real need to integrate with lots of legacy platforms. So you may be running your virtual events fine, but now it's like, oh, by the way, we still need to do the badging on site and have to go back with reintegrating with registration companies and stuff like that. And it's always a headache. Integrations, even if you've got really good open APIs, there's always going to be problems with getting integrations in place, and it is a major pain point. So when you're going through that selection process, I think one of the things to consider is, do I want to try and create a Frankenstein's monster of lots of different technologies which are loosely integrated and lots of points of failure? Or is it better in some cases to try and simplify the technology stack and go for a more of an all-in-one platform? And so, there's all sorts of examples I've seen of taking people for a really disjointed experience where they might register in one platform, then the exhibitor gets pushed into another platform to do the exhibitor onboarding, exhibitor manual, then it gets pushed into another platform, which might have the exhibitor listing, and finally, potentially 4 or 5 points of failure before it even gets to the actual event platform. So, can you make life easier for yourself by cutting out the integrations? Is definitely worth considering, always, I think. But having said that, there are really good examples out there of sort of that type of integration which really does add value. And so some of those I think can be on the more like cosmetic layer, I guess, or the like the content experience. So if you're using like tools like Glisser, for example, for polls, they integrate pretty well with lots of different platforms. We are just about. There's a couple that we're about to announce that we've been working on in very close partnership with another couple of event technology companies. One of them is a tool called Session Board, and so Session Board is great if you've got complex content agendas to build, and if you want to do call for papers and peer reviews, and really useful in academic conferences. So we saw there being a need for us to like for those types of conferences to do all the speaker management and everything within one platform, and then push a button and it syncs with us. So that's one example. There's another example that we're working on at the moment with one of our partners who do badging kiosks. They already run off of Expo platform software, and so for us it made absolute sense that we now have a sort of like a co-branded service and things like that. So there are there's plenty of other examples of that as well. So there are definitely like integrations which do really work. The most difficult thing is when an organizer comes to a technology company and says, "This is all my legacy stack. Can you build integrations with this?" And if it hasn't been properly thought through, and if the time limits are short, it's an absolute headache.
Absolutely. And legacy, I think, has been one of the key words over the last few years that we've seen used very frequently. We've got about 1 minute, Luke, so I wanted to ask you one other quick question before we finish up. Cross-industry pollination. So you mentioned some great examples there of integrations that work, but I'm interested, are there any other industries that work with tech particularly well that we as an event industry can take an example of and execute ourselves?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's loads, but the ones that the one that I always think of, and that's just because, as we said at the beginning, I like music, but for me, Spotify, I just think is amazing. And so how you can take a library of millions and millions of songs and deliver a personalized experience to every single person that uses it. And they've got all sorts of really interesting ways of doing the curation. So the AI recommendations are based on you, of course, your own listening preferences, those of other people around you, peer groups, people who look like you. But what that does is it takes this huge library of stuff, and you can totally see how that can apply itself to events of all different sizes with large content programs, large marketplaces, and how that can give you, this is my discovery playlist. These are the 5 sessions, the 4 people to meet, and the 10 exhibitors who I need to meet, and then you take that a step forward. Could that automatically start putting meetings into your calendar? Could it show you the optimized route around the venue and start planning your entire day for you? For me, that's the thing I always, just from like pure ease of use, curation excellence. I think for me Spotify. I would have mentioned Netflix previously, but they've not been having a particularly great time, and I seem to get some pretty bizarre recommendations as well. So a bit less excited about that.
Yeah, some problems in the AI. No, that great example, and I think as well, Brant talked earlier about the sports industry, which is probably another industry we can look at and take some best practice learnings from. It goes back to that old adage, doesn't it? It's not think outside the box, it's look outside the box and look at what other industries are doing and see how we can apply them to our own. Luke, I think we could probably talk about this all day, and I know that people can reach out to you if they have any more questions, of course, but we have come to the end of our session, so I'll be welcoming Judith back onto the platform so that we can say goodbye. But thank you so much, Luke, and thank you so much to all of our audience.
Oh, thank you both very much. Again, a great session to finish on, because, as you say, it's understanding what tech we need, when we need it, who we go to. It's always very key. And you've brought up some very, very kind of, poignant issues that I know we all face. So again, I know this is something that we'll probably be still talking about, and there's all sorts of things that will hopefully extend these conversations at the show in September. But for now, I just want to thank you both very, very much. That's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith.
Thank you very much.